A decade ago, oil supplied 90% of Hawaii's energy. Ours was the most fossil fuel dependent state in the nation, and demand was increasing rapidly. All signs pointed to the critical need to alter our course.
At the height of the high cost of oil, the state of Hawaii, the citizens, sent $6 billion out of state to purchase fossil fuel. And we knew that committing to a clean energy future would allow us to transform our economy from sending so much of our resources out of state to being able to invest in clean energy projects in state that would create jobs and better economic opportunities.
The Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative was launched in 2008, determined to create a Hawaii-powered clean energy economy within a single generation. Hawaii's small geographic size and population, along with its abundant renewable resources and political will to make a change, made the state an ideal candidate to pilot a large-scale energy transition.
Hawaii's achievement since the 2008 Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative is nothing short of amazing. I mean, just think about being back in 2008 when we only had about 9% of our generation being renewable, and today it's 27%. So we've made huge strides since then.
Realizing partnerships and collaboration would be the keys to success, Hawaii partnered with the U.S. Department of Energy, as well as local businesses, institutions, policymakers, and concerned citizens to chart a course toward energy independence and a clean energy future.
Hawaii has helped DOE further pursue its mission, ultimately because what Hawaii is doing is ensuring its own energy security, utilizing resources it has at hand to decrease vulnerability to global fuel prices, to natural disasters that may impact the energy infrastructure. They've also served as an example for a lot of other island systems and have really worked a lot to do sharing of those experiences with their counterparts.
We're a very humble culture, but we are and we should be very proud of what we've been able to accomplish by being the national leaders when it comes to clean energy in the United States of America. No other state in the Union has a mandate that the state of Hawaii has, and that is to achieve 100% renewable energy in its electrical sector by 2045. And we will continue to have that distinction in history. And in many ways, we're going to lead the way and we're going to show the rest of the nation that if we can do it here in Hawaii, it can be done everywhere throughout the world.
Through this initiative, Hawaii has become the nation's leading testbed for energy transformation, setting an example for others to follow. Having surpassed its original goals, the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative has now raised the bar even higher, committing to 100% clean energy by 2045.
We like a challenge here, and I think as we continue to move forward, the challenges are going to get harder, but the resiliency and the motivation of the people that are involved in this movement is going to get even stronger.
I want everyone to understand that Hawaii is very serious about our commitment to clean, renewable energy. We see it as a game changer for us to transform our economy, and more importantly, we are proud to be able to step forward and lead the country and the world to a clean, renewable energy future.
To learn more about how you can support Hawaii's journey toward a clean energy future, visit hawaiicleanenergyinitiative.org.
Please welcome Director Louis Salaveria and the business opportunities created by HCEI panel to the stage.
Thank you very much, everybody, for being here, and definitely thank you, panel, for allowing me this opportunity and for us to have a discussion around what happened with HCEI and where we're at and the opportunities, what we've learned about business opportunities in the renewable energy sector, and where have we hit, where have we missed, involving both utility scale and distributed renewable resources, and maybe even if we have some time, maybe even talk about this so-called market for carbon. And what does that mean for the state of Hawaii? So thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our very distinguished panel here. And right next to me is Kyle Datta. Kyle is a general partner with Ulupono Initiative, a Hawaii-focused for-profit investment firm. Previously, Kyle was CEO of U.S. Biodiesel Group, a national biodiesel firm funded by private equity. Prior to that, he was managing director of research for the Managing Director of Research and Consulting at the Rocky Mountain Institute, and was also Vice President at Booz Allen Hamilton. Well, thank you. Welcome, Kyle, to the panel.
Good to be here.
Yeah. Next to Kyle, we have Don Lippert, who, in many ways, I think everybody here knows, but let me go ahead and go through Don's bio here. Don is CEO of the Elemental Accelerator and Director of Innovation and Community at Emerson Elemental. She's also the chair of the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative Advisory Board. Don previously worked as a management consultant with Booz Allen Hamilton's alternative energy practice in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Don, to the panel. And right next to Don is Wren Wescoatt. And I get to talk to Wren all the time, so this is like having a conversation in my office. But Wren has had extensive experience in Hawaii's clean energy sector and currently serves as Director of Energy Development at 7 Generation Consulting, where he advises clients on the development of utility-scale renewable energy projects here in the islands. Prior to 7 Generation Consulting, Wren worked as Senior Director of Development at Sun Edison in Hawaii, where he led the development of 2 utility-scale wind projects on Oahu's North Shore. And thank you, Wren, for being here. So, I wanted this to be more of a discussion, and having the opportunity to have a conversation around what the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative has been able to, unquestionably do in being a positive force in promoting investment and creating opportunities in Hawaii. And, obviously the passage of the landmark legislation of 100% RPS has, removed any ambiguity around where the state is headed with its clean transformation efforts. But in terms of making such a bold statement like that, sometimes the devil's in the details, right? How are we going to get there? 2045 is a long time away. A lot of things are going to happen. But we're very lucky that today's panels represents very different segments of Hawaii's clean energy ecosystem. And they'll all get to offer their perspective on what has happened, what they think is going to happen, and give us a little bit of this postcard of the future look in terms of what opportunities exist, where we are right now in both the private sector as well as in the public sector arena when it comes to business investments and the overall impact in Hawaii's economy, which I think has been a resounding kind of theme around Hawaii's clean energy transportation. So, are you guys okay? I'm just going to dive into questions right now. Yes, okay. My first question is for Kyle. What impact do you think HCEI has had on Hawaii's energy industry?
Well, so HCEI changed the frame of what was possible and what was desirable. It was a truly unique bipartisan political and industry consensus to move the state forward, actually initially focused around large-scale renewable infrastructure to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel. And in turn, that unique consensus at that time triggered a lot of investor interest, something that put our state on the map. And what that did was that actually brought a new set of players into a state. All of a sudden, lots of the larger energy companies and developers started showing up because they realized we were seriously going to look at putting in a substantial amount of infrastructure, but also did something very important locally, which I think sometimes we forget about. It actually galvanized Hawaii's large landowners to make commitments of land and ultimately human resources to this initiative. And if we hadn't had that, beyond Castle and Cook, HCNS, MLMP, Grove Farm, KS, that's where a lot of these facilities are sited. And that was an important shift because now you had a very strong, not just the energy sector, but the land sector saying, yes, we're going to go forward with this. It actually, of course, led to, in some ways, you look back over time, hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in the state. And we did a lot. We accomplished a lot. We did accomplish utility scale, wind and solar. We did a lot of distributed solar. We looked at and worked hard on biofuels projects, and we looked hard and worked hard on the inter-island cable. The latter two were all part of didn't materialize, but, you know, just to give you a sense of resources, I think the private sector put in at least $10 million into those last two, and the public sector probably put in, you should look at the demonstration projects from DOE and how that helped, probably 40, 50, maybe even 60 million in total. So there are a lot of resources were brought into the state, and that landscape now remains today. You know, we are still on the map for the large energy companies. We still have now a much deeper bench of credible developers. You had a shift in the utility in terms of its commitment. And so it's important how much it changed from where we were.
And it's interesting because one of the things that has been discussed is, you know, why Hawaii has been so important, given the fact that it is, you know, pretty small. It's a small market. I mean, I'm the director of DBET, I'll admit, it's a small market. And so, but we have had this level of investment. And so, you know, moving forward now, and we've had these larger kind of, you know, utility scale projects, landowners getting involved. You know, my next question now is for Don. And in your role, obviously, you get to see probably some of the more, you know, smaller kind of guys, you know, the startups, the guys that are wanting to break into this. They're definitely not landowners in Hawaii or large utility scale type developers. But what have you seen in your experience, and having been somebody that has actually seen the entire HCEI from probably its inception to where it's at right now in terms of your innovation and startup sector?
Sure, yeah, happy to share a little bit of that. So in many ways, I have grown up with the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative. I was, you know, a really junior analyst working on building Scenario 8. So I think Jerry and I may be the only ones that remember those models and those decks and working together on that and stakeholders. From a historical perspective, I mean, it's one reason that we're actually refreshing that and looking at what's happened over the last 10 years and what some different pathways are going forward. And so that's in process right now, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We actually are doing the same process that we did in that initial HCEI analysis, which is to invite as many people as possible to be part of it. We've interviewed, or the firm we're working with now, two firms, Rhodium Group on the energy side and Smart Growth America on transportation, to make sure that that's really as robust as the electricity side, where that team has interviewed almost 100 people locally and stakeholders, and is going to have another session tomorrow. It's open to all of you to get initial feedback too. So another really open process around really trying to understand what that roadmap looks like. I mean, that's the basis of the HCEI idea, and I think that will carry it forward going forward. I think from the innovation perspective, one thing I just have really seen in the last number of years since Maurice and I started the predecessor to the Excelerator in 2009 is that it's a really competitive market for innovation and a competitive market around the world to bring the best talent and startups and technology here to Hawaii. So the more aligned we are and as you said, the devil's in the details, the better our market structures and the more thoughtful we are and the better leadership we have locally, it makes a huge difference in our ability to attract that talent. So we've seen some terrific progress there in the last number of years, and I think we still have a little work to do. I'll actually show one quick slide of just what we've seen. We've, at the Excelerator, have now supported over 60 companies, invested in them from our nonprofit perspective across energy, water, agriculture, transportation, and all of this has been really made possible by the conditions of Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative and putting our foot forward and saying that we want to be the place that competes for the best talent in the world. And this is just a quick map of what that looks like. I'll just show you. And it's across the energy sector. Where's this guy going? Can you head to the next one? It's across the energy sector, and you'll see that it's actually everything from residential. Oh, no, there's water, and we got water. All right, can do it. You'll see it on the grid side that's actually across the entire energy sector. So everything from residential energy efficiency. There we go. I know. I hope you caught it. Well done. Everything from residential.
Subliminal.
Everything from residential energy efficiency all the way to utility IT, working very closely with Hawaiian Electric on some of the utility scale projects as well. So you can actually see that the innovation ecosystem that's been created here through the work of HCEI and through some of the government structures that we have has been pretty deep. So now you guys are just all in suspense. So I know you can't can't wait to see it, but we'll show that map in just a minute.
Oh, thank you, Don. You know, my next panelist here is Wren, actually somebody who has done projects here in Hawaii, and 2 very successful projects. What I'm very curious of is do you think HCEI, a lot has been talked about in the first panel around where HCEI started, where it's at right now, you know, have we gone off the rails a little bit? But during the beginning, when some of those projects were coming around, did you see some kind of alignment? Did HCEI influence kind of the broader, you know, governmental public thinking around doing utility scale projects, especially on Oahu, especially?
Well, thanks. First, before I start, I want to pull a Jerry Sumida and ask the audience a question. How many folks here are from government? Okay, how many folks are from the utilities? Okay, and how many folks are here from some sort of private business, private industry, commercial? Okay, so I'm just kidding, I can't really see anyone because of the lights, but thank you for participating. Good idea, Jerry. I think we're all up here representing, I think, at some level, commercial interests, and the 30% of homes that have PV, the 27, 28% of renewable, where we are now, is largely because of private businesses, commercial interests that are really driving a lot of this. And so I think a lot of my comments are going to be related to what HCEI did was really set a direction, which was important, but also there's a little bit of a good, the bad, and the ugly of how much the government enabled private business to succeed and how much they got in the way. So some of the good was, I think, as an overarching policy, it aligned a lot of the state agencies. Our projects, very large projects, I've done 4 wind projects and 3 large utility scale solar projects, all of which were approved, went through state permitting agencies and county very successfully, Maui and Honolulu. And there's been a lot of alignment. It's fortunate, it's one of those rare times when like a good idea transcended government's ability to screw it up. And so, it's created a lot of positives.
I'm from the government, I'm here to help.
I know. Right. Yes. Some of the bad are when, in some cases where I think, the state agencies got in the way a little bit. We'll do the EIS for the cable. We'll set up an expedited permitting process, which ended up taking longer than the other permitting process. So there were some, I think, just instructive in terms of what some of the positives and the negatives. And the ugly, I will mention something I was involved with, big wind. So there was projects proposed on Moloka'i and Lanai, which were going along, at a pretty good clip about 9 years ago. The state, HCEI came along, state says, hey, we'll do the EIS for the cable. Now you can be the judge. Did Big Wind fail because the state got involved in the EIS or because it was just a really stupid name? Who knows?
Who knows?
I'll leave you all to judge. But HCEI really, I think, set a tone, but it's certainly time, if we're going to continue to get value out of it, some of the takeaways need to be to what degree does the government really, how much do we want our state driving it, and how much do we want them to create the conditions so that the private enterprise that comes up with the ideas, finances it, designs it, permits it, that they can do their thing and the state is supportive?
That brings me to a point, and that is where I think certainty in the market is what, and nothing is 100% guaranteed, but I think business enters and makes investments, makes decisions based upon analyzing a degree of risk. And when you have certainty in policy, certainty in some level of decision making, that actually helps. It helps the business environment. So maybe Kyle, you can answer this. that regulatory relationship now between the PUC and, say, Hawaii's utilities and energy, how does that certainty affects or regulatory environment affect investment in Hawaii?
Well, it's enormously important, and I'm going to pick the answer to this question up by looking at two types of investors. They're the investors in independent power, both utility scale and distributed, and there's investors in the utility itself. And the PUC affects both of those investment streams. So investors in independent power and distributed power will only invest if they believe it's a fair playing field, there's fair competition. And for those of you who wonder why Ulupono, as an investor, is so active in certain dockets at the PUC, it's because we have a very active interest in making sure the investment playing field is level and fair. If it's tilted away towards the utility or is perceived as unfair, then frankly investors in the major companies will just go elsewhere and you have adverse selection. It's the weaker, more desperate players that will play in that kind of a game. But they're not the only investors that matter. The investors in the utility need policy consistency. You mentioned that. And that's exactly right, across the political cycles. If we say we're going to build this kind of infrastructure, that's typically going to last more than one governor. We have to stay that course because there's a lot of effort and time and money we put into that, and we have to stay the course around that. And similarly, when a utility really runs into the buzzsaw of a PUC and it expresses kind of very vocal displeasure in the utility, not just about what's prudent, but also in this rhetorically, that affects the utility's ratings. It actually makes the utility a target for acquisition, which is in some ways what just happened. So it's important that one of the great things that HCEI did, and this really was the beauty of, in some ways, that bipartisan capability between the governor, the federal, and the state, was it really made the PUC and the consumer advocate, independent. Under Carlito, Calaboso, Catherine Alcuni, they really brought the PUC to where it is today, and that's so important. There was a landmark series of decisions and legislation that happened all at the same time that collectively created a cluster around energy metering, the efficiency utility, decoupling, all of which actually made investment in the renewable space and the utility space very profitable. Those things it's like a grand bargain. But to understand how important that is, I can actually give you a little history lesson going back before HCEI, because sometimes, in Hawaii, we're always never happy with exactly where things are. We're like, oh God, I wish it was better. But sometimes we forget how far we've come. So just to go back maybe 15, 20 years, before HCEI, in many ways, the Hawaii PUC was quite captive in many ways to the utility. There was a real asymmetry of information. The consumer advocate at the time was very against renewables. And things were so bad that in the county of Hawaii, where I live, we suffered through 5 years of brownouts. That means power is consistently going off because rather than force HELCO to buy the power from an independent power group that actually won the bids and now competed at the Kaihole power plant, HELCO persisted at the time in going forward with that plant because they'd already bought the turbines. And so there was no push by the PUC to actually make them go back. And that's where we came from. So to understand how far we've come a very long way. And so let's fast forward to today to understand what just happened in the last, really, 3 months, 4 months, and just how important that is. We spent 5 years debating which way do we go? What kind of power supply package are we going to have? And that was a long debate. It was a good debate. It was a healthy debate. We made a decision we're going to go down this accelerated renewal path. So that's where we're going. We have finally gotten rules around a RFP that's going to have both firm renewables and non-firm renewables and community solar. And we're getting orders on distributed response, and also we're working on the DERs. So importantly, the PUC not only made a decision around direction, but they also made decisions around fair competition. They said, you know what, in phase 1 of some of these programs, we're not going to have the utility bid, in part because of our history. Not necessarily because the executives today are the executives of the past, but because the history, we want to make sure that everyone knows this playing field is going to be fair. And so guess what? There's an enormous amount of investor interest, including ourselves, in investing in this earlier stage of development. What we haven't solved, and where I think our next challenge is, we have not solved the issue for an investor-owned utility of how does it make money in the future. That's the last really big PUC task. In some ways, HCEI solved that 10 years ago around efficiency. We have not solved that for how does the utility make money in the distributed energy future and in this high renewable future, and that's important. So I feel like we have a task for the PUC to come around the investor-owned. Clearly for the co-op, it's working for them, but for the investor-owned, it's not, and I think that's where we need to go next.
So I guess in some ways you see that the challenges are going away a little bit, but there's still other challenges that are coming up. So Wren, for somebody that does projects, do you see the PUC and some of the challenges that kind of regulating that ecosystem? Do you see that helping or changing, or somehow how does it affect the market for like utility scale projects?
Sure. So I think I agree with Kyle that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the PUC was definitely well aligned with the utility and what the utility wanted to do, probably too much so. And then probably 2 years ago, we had swung way the other way, and the PUC was, if HECO said we want to do A, the PUC says, no, you're going to do B, and HECO revised their plan and says, okay, we'll do B, and PUC says, no, we need you to do C. So I think there was a little bit, the pendulum swung probably a little too far, and that created new risks in my market. At first we were thinking like, oh, HECO has to, we need more renewable energy RFPs so we can build more projects. They're not happening, and that was the risk. And then it was, oh my gosh, what if we get through with HECO and the PUC doesn't approve a project? Then that's another risk. So I think we've swung both ways. I think recently it's come back a little bit more, and that's probably going to help. What we need is a plan. We need a long-term plan, not where they pick the projects and they say how many megawatts per year, but there's a plan to move to bring renewable projects, large and small, to create room. And I think we're getting there, to create room, not just right now for the next 3 years, but over the next 20 years. What's our general plan? How are we going to bring those projects online? That creates some predictable commercial opportunity for commercial scale, utility scale, even residential scale. What kind of room is there? If we're all surprised that all of a sudden NEM is over and all of a sudden the new, grid supply program is over, there's a panic, and, there's all these articles in PBN and the numbers dive again. Yeah. That's not the kind of predictability that I think encourages continued growth.
Yeah, and I have a couple of thoughts around sort of that next frontier of things that need to be figured out too. I think particularly from the perspective of looking at it from innovators and what's coming next. And one of the things that hasn't been figured out and that we still really tussle around is data and how we deal with data for companies, and both utility data and then share it. I was just talking to one of our startup CEOs yesterday, and he was talking about how they are exactly tiering the markets they're going into, and thinking about, if you have smart meters, and then exactly what the rules are around connect my data or data that's shared out of smart meters, and what the packages are around that, and how quickly the utilities are able to turn around that data, or if customers are actually able to just select to share it with different providers so they can get more services off their meters. So there are some ways that other jurisdictions have solved some of these challenges. That's just one, I think, around smart meters and data. But that whole question of how we view our data in the state and share it is a huge issue for competitiveness for some of these companies that are really on the frontier. And I think both on energy, but also what we're seeing in water and transportation, is the companies that are going to be really the growth companies of the future, ones that are figuring out how to digitize those industries really efficiently and sort of connect networks of projects well. Yeah. And so how we figure that out as a state is next. And then, Wren and Kyle both alluded to the DER and DER markets. Yeah. And I think from my perspective and from the innovators that we're talking to, getting those market structures right, making sure they're competitive, transparent, and that when we say we're going to do projects, we do them. Those are some really important pieces around DER and DR. So I see that as the next frontier of setting the rules correctly here. And if we get that right, it'll work well for a number of years. And if we get it wrong, we're going to be in a real world of hurt, I think.
And interesting, the whole idea around data, and we talk about how this thing is evolving, not just the electricity. I mean, we're talking about transportation. You heard Alan just talk in the panel before this about 5G and broadband and capacity and how that all means. I mean, interestingly enough, I think when you look at data and you look at some of the trajectory, I mean, this afternoon I get the opportunity I'm a data freak, right? I am a data freak. I've always been a data freak. Our state economist, Dr. Tia, he's a data super freak, actually. And he's going to talk a little bit about what he's seeing now in some of the storage actually permitting that's happening. And when you look at things that happen, and this is kind of going from an innovation side, hockey sticks. When you see hockey sticks in trend graphs, right? You see da 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 da, right? That's anybody here remember Price is Right? The yoda 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 yoda. Well, this is what the data is looking like. Look at the PV market back in the distributed PV market over the past several years prior to NEM going away. It was like, woo, and he just kind of fell off the cliff. But that's another story. We're seeing other types of data, hockey sticks, starting to happen, and so understanding how the market is going to react to those types of trends is going to be very important. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is that HCEI created a degree of, and I'm going a little bit off script, it's just based upon our discussion that we had. HCEI created a little bit of stability around the projection going forward. But conceptually, it's still disruptive. It's still disruptive to what we're trying to kind of create over here. You have so many different players. Do you see this disruption helping business or kind of like making it more challenging? Because arguably I could say that, well, it doesn't help institutional business. It may help new, innovative business or institutions that can evolve. But does this disruption actually help business or create opportunities? Wren.
Well, I guess what I would like to do is, I like your question, but I'm going to change it.
Okay.
So I'm thinking back to, when you say does it help business, I think we have to look at what are we trying to do in business. And I want to go back to the picture that Chris Lee put up of the water, and the Mokuluas, and the place where there's no beach. That's what we're trying. That's where the business opportunity is. Business is about solving people's problems. And I cannot think of a bigger problem than we're heating our planet and shrinking our islands. So that's what we're trying to work on. And I think HCEI was helpful in it said, hey, this is a problem. It's a shared problem. We need to go in that direction. There was a lot of support. In the Lingle administration, the Energy Office was, created and increased. And then there's been sort of in subsequent administrations, there's sort of a sucking sound as, people left that office, and there was just a lack of continued support. But the initiative was really important, and I think we need to have, as they talked about in the previous panel, some kind of reboot or some kind of renewed initiative. And maybe it's not just about energy, maybe it's about clean economy. But to get us all working in the same direction, because that's our shared problem. And it's our shared business opportunity. That's what we're here doing for our children. I mean, there's no bigger responsibility than getting Hawaii going in the right direction and serving as an example to others, because it means a lot to us. If you're in Colorado, you may not be losing beach, but we are. And so this is something that we all are focused on, and I think we take what worked in HCEI and turn it into what do we need now? What's really going to help and set a course now?
Don?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, so we have in HCEI some of these long-term goals that are really powerful, but there's actually a lot of near-term decisions that are really difficult that make much more of a difference to the business community and how we're able to move forward. And so I think it's alignment around some of those much harder decisions that we feel like we're missing or we feel like we need more alignment on now, and I really agree with that. I think from from my perspective, in the business community sense, people who are trying to solve these problems are deeply passionate about fixing our world and making a better future for the next generation. I mean, if that is not what you're passionate about, you will definitely be starting a social media company or a digital currency company, but not necessarily a company that's solving water problems and mobility and these other problems. So people are deeply passionate about this. They want to help, but Hawaii is still a very difficult place to do business, and it still takes a lot longer to do things here than other places, and I think we still really are missing some of the key business infrastructure to make it easier. So I think we need to be honest with ourselves about that and then actually really work together to make it better. And Ulupono has been really thinking about this as well.
So, to pick up on your points and to build on the other two. So the disruption in technology is blurring the lines. It's blurring traditional lines that we've had around where are the sectors. We always think of energy as, well, there's electricity over here and transport over here. And now we're saying, well, actually, that's all blurred. The customer's over here, there's the meter, we're on this side, okay, that's all blurred. And so there's the opportunity, of course, is in those new business models around deploying those technologies. And because there's an efficiency gain. Why is there value? There's an efficiency gain. It's better than the other path. And so how do we work it as a business model? But it's also going to mean, this is where HCEI round 2 can make a difference. There'll be different people at the party, right? So if you think about it, now we're in everybody's homes. So next year, I imagine, we'll see a bunch of folks in the real estate sector. Because frankly, look at Europe. They build it in. It's all built in to the entire development. And that's just a whole different way of looking at the situation. You change the default. Right now, the poor utility company has to get everyone to opt in. In Europe, they're opting out, right? You have to opt out because by default, your whole home is playing with the grid and doing everything else, and it's a locus. So that makes a huge opportunity, of course, for the real estate industry, but also, frankly, how we plan the next round of housing, which we all know is a crisis, will totally affect everything related to transportation, period. If we blow it, we're going to have gridlock. I don't care if you have an electric car and gridlock, a little better, but it's still gridlock. If we do it right, we'll have transit-oriented development, we'll have smart communities, we'll have sidewalks, we'll have a lot of things that look different, multimodal transportation, and we'll use a lot less energy. Again, getting back to the vision, which was to get off of fossil fuels. So our opportunity in Hawaii, what we saw from the first round of HCEI is when you get the political and the broad business community that's affected by has to commit the resources on the same page, and they commit. Our state moves forward. Technology doesn't always work, but we move forward as a state. When we don't have all the actors committed, it takes even longer, and it's harder, and you don't have all the pieces. And we're a small state, so happily we have that opportunity.
And on the transportation one, just to put a quick point on that too, I mean, on electricity, we are decarbonizing. We've gone over a quarter renewable energy now. Yeah. On transportation, demand continues to grow. It's growing 2-3% a year, and it has been getting worse and worse every single year. So unless we make a really meaningful change in transportation, it's going to overwhelm a lot of the improvements that we continue to make on the electricity side.
And we're definitely talking about larger social issues, which kind of relate back into this whole thing. And even going back to Wren's position, or discussion around, what we're doing this for. I mean, we always kind of get to this whole thing about what we're doing it for. If I look at HCEI and I think about back at 2008, I mean, the whole discussion about the environment, the world, all of these things. And then all of a sudden, probably around 2010, 2011, it became financially viable, especially for Hawaii. When oil was at $100 a barrel, it made financial sense. And now all of a sudden, we find ourselves coming back circle around. It's like, okay, it's environment again. When the discussion was really around the environment, it was hard to get people to buy in. I mean, it was expensive, it was cost, maybe things are a little bit different now. But then when it started making economic sense, in the actual pocket of the individual, you had significant level of adoption, especially in distributed resources. You started to see the utility start to invest in renewable things. Now that we're going back to this thing again about environment, and we see this a lot with our decarbonization, and it's one of the topics that they wanted us to kind of talk about. Will the general public actually buy that? Is there a value proposition for the general public that they can say, you know what, okay, I will make the investment, unlike how it was before where obviously I saw a huge drop in my electricity bill?
Well, I hope that people are thinking about it differently, because before it was, well, you know, if we do nothing and keep doing what we're doing right now, we won't have to spend more for renewable energy. Well, and now doing nothing, we're realizing is so expensive. I mean, we are, you know, carbonizing. We're, you know, generating too much carbon. These activities are causing sea level rise and reef acidification and so many of the things that are damaging to everything we hold dear, that if the no action alternative is very costly. And we're actually looking at how do we reduce those kinds of costs by, you know, finding another alternative. Does it cost more in terms of cents on my electric bill? Eventually it may be. So far it hasn't. So far, you know, solar's been cheaper than what we've been able to do. But eventually it may. To get to 100%, sure, 80% is going to cost more. 90% is going to cost more than that. Incrementally, it's going to cost more. But that's just in terms of dollars on the electric bill. I mean, look at what it's costing us now to keep doing what we're doing. So I think people are kind of changing. One example, someone on the North Shore of Oahu, right? They're looking at their beach and they're seeing that, you know, they're figuring out if they have to put in a seawall because their beach is eroding and their deck is falling into the ocean. And then they turn around and they look up at the wind farm, the Kauailoa wind farm, and they say, how did they put that wind farm? It's ruining my view of the mountains. I mean, people are not making the connection. Some people are not making that connection. And I think there will be, as future renewable energy projects get proposed, there is going to be a real sort of come to Jesus moment to say, listen, are we going to continue to think about it the old way, that we, no matter what, we preserve our view planes, we preserve our agricultural land that no one's using, we continue to, you know, support the legislation that started out in the 70s, or do we look at, okay, well, maybe we have to think about some new priorities now that we have a new understanding of what's happening in the world, and say, okay, is it okay to have a floating wind farm, you know, off Oahu, 10 miles off Oahu? I mean, we probably would have thought no 20 years ago, but now maybe we have to rethink some of those priorities. Are we willing to have solar projects on some of our ag land, in our fallow ag land? It's just, as priorities change, we need to take a different look and realize what's the cost of doing nothing. The no action, no renewable project, that's a big cost.
So the opportunity is there. It's just there's like these little hurdles or just little like levers that just need to be pulled down in order to get us to those opportunities?
Well, going back to your question, how do you get to this to benefit everyday people? You have to remember our state is relatively poor, right? The new study came out, 49% of our population is at Alice sort of level or below, living day to day. So we're trying to ask really fundamental questions. What does it cost you to live in your home? How do you get to work affordably? So those are going to turn into, I think, public-private partnerships. You're going to have the next round of housing, again, be very energy efficient, really have the default set so it plays well with the grid, and you do it at scale. You do 1,000 homes at a time, and that changes how the utility works with the real estate community, and that obviously all of a sudden all the economics work for everybody. Similarly, I know we're looking at the Volkswagen settlement. How do we get more electric buses? How do we lower the costs of public transportation, because it will, and how do we get more public transportation accessibility so people can move back and forth? So those things really bring the benefits to everyday people, and I think that's really important. But I intuit that ultimately, because we're not necessarily a really rich state either, it'll be a public-private partnership to make those happen.
Yeah, my last thought on that is just that on Monday this week, we blessed the new Amber Kinetics flywheel out on the west side of Oahu, and we were there with Hawaiian Electric and also American Electric. And so one of the things that I think sometimes we miss when we talk about the clean energy stuff that's happening is there are specific sort of solar jobs and wind jobs, but there's also a lot of trades in this. There's electricians, there's contractors, there's people that are working on, sort of project management and like all across the skill sets. And we're training more and more people into this and seeing a lot of really good paying jobs coming not just in our sort of commercial side of what's happening in large scale renewables, but also in our innovation economy that intersects really well with the trades and other jobs. So we see that as a really important part of the discussion here too.
Well, I want to thank my panel. I mean, we kind of went all over the place. I'm horrible at following scripts for some reason these last couple of days. But, I wanted to talk about Trump. I want to talk about all this stuff. And, we're not going to get to it, unfortunately. But you do have a video for us, Don, that you would like to show to talk a little bit about kind of, HCEI and what's happening with the innovation sector and the business sector. So can we cue that up?
Yeah, we'll leave everyone with a little bit of hope of what's happening with our next generation of entrepreneurs. So can you guys cue that up?
Of all of the places and all the wonders that she'd seen, Hawaii was the most resilient, the most accepting to change.
This movement is real. That our convictions lead to innovation, lead to conservation, that technology must serve ecology. And you can hear the world breathing.
We've now deployed over $20 million to companies, and they've gone on to take that funding and raise over $350 million of follow-on funding. We also have implemented over 28 demonstration projects in Hawaii and the Asia-Pacific.
Nicholas Flanders, co-founder and CEO of Opus 12. Virtually anything that you can make from oil, we can make from CO2. We're recreating photosynthesis, but at warp speed. A single unit will have the power of 37,000 trees in the volume of a suitcase.
There is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar market globally for these energy technologies.
Swiftly is a big data platform that analyzes billions of data points to help transit agencies become more efficient. In total, we've now launched this platform in 29 cities, and we impact 2 million transit riders every single day.
Lisa Lee, I'm the VP of Marketing at Vidgely. Our system allows their utility to provide insights on their energy usage by appliance to reduce their energy bill by a couple $100 each year. We are on our 25th utility in about 12 countries around the world.
Terraviva is commercializing an oilseed tree crop called Pangamia. Very proud to announce here today, we are going to be planting 2,000 acres of Pangamia, and we're going to bring 20 jobs back to that particular part of the state.
My name is Arcady, and I'm here to introduce FreeWire Technologies. We've gone global already with customers such as Vector, who's in the crowd, and as of this morning, we've signed a deal with Dubai Electricity and Water Authority to scale the product up in the Middle East as well.
So at WaterSmart, we work with water utilities and help them to better understand and effectively communicate with their customers. WaterSmart now works with 60 water utilities in 12 different states.
We could be a part of a paradigm shift from an economy that is fundamentally extractive to one that is circular. Nature figured this out millions of years ago.
Because for our mission of healing and strengthening the symbiosis between humanity and nature, there is not a place on this planet that plays greater host and offers greater evidence that we can succeed than Hawaii. So we're so proud to have the Excelerator be at home and then grow that journey, find its way across the Pacific and ultimately beyond.
Well, I want to thank my panel again. Yes, there is definitely hope. And, again, obviously, this is a very important topic for the state and for everybody here that wants to be involved in what the clean economy is going to move forward. Business is economy, the economy is business. And so I want to thank our panel for having this large and very broad discussion. Definitely could have gone on for a lot longer, could have addressed a lot more topics. 45 minutes is never enough. And I want to thank the audience for listening to us too as well. So thank you very much, and hope you have a very good rest of the conference.